Going into the Endwalker media tour for Final Fantasy XIV, I was super thrilled to be invited and be a part of it, but I'll admit I made a major mistake. I pretty much only know how to play Black Mage. That's my only level 80 class, and thus it's the only one I truly know how to play. However, personally, I like to think I play it well enough. I'm not the best, but I know enough about my rotation and the class that I'm a comfortable part of an endgame raid. So when I was invited to do the media tour and heard about the Black Mage abilities I'd be trying out, I figured I'd do at least one thing well here. Take about the only thing I know how to do in this game and do it as well as possible. While imperfect, I checked out the tooltips, figured out a bit of rotation, saw what's changing, and brought that out for you guys. Here is a Black Mage mains analysis on Black Mage's changes for the Endwalker expansion. Most significantly, Enochian is no longer an ability and is instead a trait, meaning you'll no longer need to keep recasting it if you drop it, and there's not that stinky 30-second cooldown time between activations. It activates as soon as you have either Astral Fire or Umbral Ice, meaning as soon as you use a spell of either element. It's great for pretty much everyone, as this means you won't need to weave it into your rotations, but you'll still need to make a recovery should you drop it. Also, a major change that you need to know is that Aspect Mastery, currently a level 72 trait, will be a level 1 trait now. Yep, that's right, 0 mana to swap from Fire to Ice, or Ice to Fire from level 1. From the get-go, you can just entirely ditch Transpose mid-battle for the most part. Transpose will still probably stay a useful way to keep your Astral Fire and Astral Ice up between mobs and dungeons until you get Umbral Soul, but it was always kind of messy to learn as a new player, so this is a positive change for sure. The first super important spell you'll be getting is Paradox, which is a really cool 2-element spell you probably remember from the job trailer. And it's not just a pretty spell, it allows you to continue your rotation with a lot of really cool perks. I'm about to spend a lot of time explaining its efficiency in your rotation, so buckle in. It's activated when you do a non-transpose swap between 3 stacks of either Astral Fire or Astral Ice, from one to the other. For Umbral Ice to Astral Fire, you also need 3 stacks of Umbral Hearts. Once acquired, instead of getting its own button, it takes over the Fire 1 slot. Upon casting, it also resets the timer for whichever element you're using at that moment. If you haven't already been doing this in combat, Black Mage advice, you should be. And at level 72 at the moment, you're basically encouraged to do this. Now, let me break it down for you if you don't know the current rotation yet. As a recap, at level 40, thanks to Magic and Mend, swapping from one element to the other via an attack of that opposite element reduces your cast time for that specific attack by half. It doesn't entirely eliminate the need for transpose yet, but it does give you that motivation to keep your DPS uptime by just using attacks to transition between the two. For the record, this does seem to still work in Endwalker, but it doesn't show up in toolkits. Work in progress, I suppose. Then at level 72 in the current state of the game, you get an Aspect Mastery, which means once you have 3 stacks of an element, swapping by casting an opposite element attack costs you 0 mana. That's right, it's literally a free attack with the transpose attached. Granted, the attack isn't as powerful, but it's a necessary part of your rotation to keep DPS up, and it saves you from having to rebuild your Astral Fire and Umbral Ice stacks as transpose forces you to. Again, this will be dropped to a level 1 trait in Endwalker. Anyway, as it stands, this means the standard level 80 rotation should be to swap elements using Blizzard 3, Freeze, or Fire 3. As a reminder, Flare is exempted from this, and you have to use Umbral Hearts to offset the costs. If you haven't learned this rotation yet, do it now, and you will be doing big numbers as we Black Mages deserve. Now, with all the context in mind, let's go back to Paradox and run down the trait description first. It's worth noting that Paradox is granted under Aspect Mastery 5 at level 80. When you achieve the requirements for Paradox, you get a little Paradox marker, which is this little neat thingy right here. But it's also hard to miss the big glowy box indicating that it's ready for you. As we talked about, this is activated when you swap from one element to the other with 3 markers for that element. The exact verbiage is: the marker is made active after reaching Astral Fire 3 and then swapping to the opposite element. Conversely, the marker can also be made after reaching Umbral Ice 3 and gaining 3 Umbral Hearts, then swapping to the opposite element. In other words, this is literally the level 80 Black Mage rotation. You are being rewarded for a standard rotation. Well, okay, what do you mean rewarded, Victoria? Is it really that good? Yes, it's actually pretty damn good. Let's look at the actual ability now. First of all, Paradox has a potency of 510. For comparison, Fire 3 and Blizzard 3 each have 240. Flare's initial target has 220. Ice 4 and Fire 4 each have 300. Despair has 380. Foul's initial target takes 600. And Xeno Glossy dishes a whopping 700 potency. That's also not to mention fire attacks get unspecified bonuses during an Astral Fire timer. What this means is your ability actually does more damage than all the elemental attacks, but you should be still maintaining your Enochian to weave those damage spikes into your longer rotation. Well, how do I maintain Enochian with such a cool attack tempting me, you ask? That's a question that Paradox itself already answers. It re-ups your timer for whichever element you already have running, and remember that it takes the place of Fire 1, both literally and in your rotation. Speaking of Fire 1, it also shares a very important proc. The 40% chance to proc Firestarter, which grants you a free Fire 3. You can even use Sharpcast to force that Firestarter proc, just like the more popularly shared current rotations utilize. In other words, it's screaming at you to insert itself into your rotation exactly where you would use Fire 1 to re-up your timer. Now, as for using it in your Umbral Ice phase, which is your mana recovery period, there's always the worry that you'll blow a little mana and won't be able to recover it before you swap to Fire. But Paradox says no, you will not fear the mana loss. Insert this at the end of the Ice portion of your rotation, and you cast it at the price of 0 mana. This way you can make that new swap to Fire fear-free. All of this is super cool, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it, but remember 2 things. 1, it's a level 90 spell, and 2, you only get 30 seconds with it. Yeah, I know, I hyped it up, and we gotta wait the whole expansion to be able to use it. But as a casual raider, which sounds like a paradox, I know, but I talk about it quite a bit on MMORPG here, I cannot wait to get my hands on it. Now, I know that was already sort of a game changer, and we spent a long time on it, but somehow it's not as drastic compared to the multi-enemy rotation changes in Endwalker, which, thank God, Flare and Freeze are starting to get a little dull, even for your local explosion enthusiasts. Let's start with the low-level stuff, like End of Shadowbringer's low Endwalker. Blizzard 2 and Fire 2 are getting overhauls. For one, both abilities under Aspect Mastery at level 35 will grant you 3 stacks of the Elements Crystals. The former, Blizzard 2, is no longer cast at the point at which you're standing. Much like Freeze, if cast on the target and delivers 90 potency damage to the target and all around it. However, I suspect it's going to remain untouched once you get past level 40, as Freeze does more damage, grants you the Umbral Hearts, and even has a few milliseconds less of casting time, and part of being a Black Mage is freeing up every millisecond. However, for Fire 2, I truly believe the changes will make it a core part of the late game Fire area of effect rotation. In Endwalker, you still need to blow all your Umbral Hearts on that Flare swap over, but thanks to the change in Aspect Mastery, you'll get the stacks Fire would grant without losing all your Umbral Hearts. Fire 2 still only does 90 potency of damage at this stage, like Blizzard 2, but in a Fire phase of an AoE rotation, this means you can swap over Fire 3 and still have those Astral Hearts, so you can bang out 2 Flares, full power at later levels, and don't forget that Fire boost. And just as important, Freeze now instantly grants you 3 Umbral Hearts as part of the ability. So you're still gonna have some major rotation shifts, but this is good for obvious reasons. Now, once you hit level 82, which is pretty early in the expansion, you'll be getting Aspect Mastery 4. This upgrades your Fire 2 and Blizzard 2 to High Fire 2 and High Blizzard 2. Blaze it! High Blizzard 2 isn't too terribly different, it just ups the potency by 100, that's it. But for High Fire 2, you're absolutely going to want to work this in your rotation, as it grants you Enhanced Flare. Each cast of High Fire 2 grants you 1 Enhanced Flare stack for a stack of up to 2, which of course enhances your flare damage to 260 potency instead of 220. With 3 Umbral Hearts, that means you can swap to cast High Fire 2 twice, then use your last Umbral Heart to cut your flare cost down for a high potency flare, and finally finish with another high potency flare. Be careful though, because you will lose the enhanced flare stacks after 15 seconds, or if you lose Astral Fire otherwise. So, in short, more dungeon explosions. You thought we were doing enough damage? Do you think we need more utility? Utilize these numbers. So here are some other changes and all that I'm sure people smarter than me will figure out how to implement. Enhanced Mana Font. Reduces Mana Font recast time to 120 seconds, which is down from 180. Straightforward, just go ahead and increase your fire rotation time, I guess. Enhanced Enochian 3. Explosions, I mean damage. Do 20% more damage. I don't think I need to say anything else here. Enhanced Sharpcast 2. You can stock one more Sharpcast. Where does this go in my raid rotation? Too late, I've already forgotten to use it. Amplifier gives you a free polygon. I guess this counts as a movement boost, but you gotta be under Enochian to use it, so here comes more movement button spam. Also note, all that talk about realigning proc and damage over time timers to 30-second intervals or 60-second intervals, none of that applies to Black Mage apparently. We're still stuck with our weird 24-second damage over time, 18-second proc thing for Thunder. I guess Yoshi P, our Black Mage main supreme, knows we will be too powerful if our massive wrinkled brains need to do one less piece of work. Also, Scathe goes untouched, thanks for asking. Now, chances are we spammed the rotation throughout this video as B-roll, but let me walk through one rotation of a single target in level 90 Black Mage rotation with explosions in full view, of course. I will admit this probably needs tweaks by, again, people smarter than me, but first, let's see what I came up with. Now, I'll point them out, but I did make a few mistakes here, but this is generally just a rotation. For this, I want to try to get Paradox as soon as I can, so I do my Ice Phase first, throw in the Thunder, and then I swap to Fire into my usual Fire rotation. Passively, that already grants me the Paradox, so 3 Fire 3s in here. Or until my timer is running low, and then the Paradox to re-up the timer. 3 more Fire 4s, 1, 2, 3, or however many until I lose all my mana, then goes Despair. I should have used my Fire 3 first, but then I used Mana Font. Fire 3 one more time, get the Despair in, one more swap, gives me the Paradox. Then I do my Ice rotation, weave in a Thunder 3, maybe I should have done a Xenoglossy as well. I got Blizzard 4. I don't know, I cast a Sharpcast because that is only an 18-second timer, but I re-up with a Paradox, swap over to Fire 4, Fire 3, and then I go back to my Fire, restart from there, you know how it goes. And that's sort of a rudimentary rotation. Don't forget your Thunders, your Xenoglossies, your Ley Lines, Addle if you want to mitigate damage, all that jazz. Now, let's visit the level 90 area effect rotation, which resembles a single target rotation a little bit more now with that extended fire phase. So personally, I am going to start in the Ice phase again, start with that high Blizzard 2, because what I want to do is get those Umbral Hearts from Freeze. Don't forget to weave in your Thunder, by the way. And I am going to use the Paradox I've been holding on to, just to re-up, just for fun, just to get some damage and not to lose that. So high fire, going to use that 3 times. Until I have both the Enochian stacks and just one Umbral Heart. I also get that fire boost. Then I'm going to use Flare. Here comes Flare number 1 with the enhanced Flare damage. Here comes Flare number 2 with the enhanced Flare damage as well. Swap back over to High Blizzard 2. Start from scratch. Bread and butter. Nothing too complicated about it. And great for those dungeon rotations. And that's all for the proper analysis. My opinion, I really like this. It actually kind of sucked returning to the level 80 rotation after having Paradox, Enochian cast, no instant foul. But that just means when Endwalker comes out, I'll have to work and get all those back and blast away as a good Black Mage should. So what do you think? Are you excited for these? Are you a player of another job bitter that were forever the favorites? Or are you a Black Mage and you're not really feeling that's that exciting? That would be understandable. Whatever the case, let us know. Thank you so much for joining, and check out MMORPG for more Final Fantasy XIV coverage, including more media tour stuff and other columns, news, and interviews.